This is Jenni Calma with Paper Cardinal, and I'm here today to share a couple cards that I created for Tonic Studios. I'm going to use a lot of new products to me, a lot of new products that have just been released, and I'm going to go through a lot of them before I start making the card. This is a fairly long video, so just stick with me if you don't mind, and I'm going to try to talk through most of it. First of all, I made a sketch of the two cards that I kind of had in mind. I wanted to make something similar but different in color and have sort of the same kind of idea, both using this circle blister sort of shaker set that is from Tonic. And so one card I wanted to have as kind of light and with snowflakes, and do a background of ink blending and then a snowflake stencil on top of it, and then have the blister set be snowflakes and other confetti. And then the other card, this is what the shaker set looks like. It comes with a round die and then 5 of the sort of shaker blister pieces that are the dimensional piece that are adhesive, which is amazing. So the second card I'm planning on making a lot more vibrant and being more Christmassy. It's going to have the same similar setup as far as a border and everything else, but it will be on a stencil background that's a holly background, and then the shaker piece will actually, I'm going to try to make it look like an ornament. And I'm going to use this brand new expanding mousse from Nuvo. I've never used it before, and we're super excited to see how it works. This is the Bramley apple color. So I'm doing that as the holly background, and then we'll have a red ornament in the middle using that shaker circle blister set. And I'm going to try to have a piece of twine or something hanging down to make it look like it's an ornament. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. I pulled a bunch of other things and a lot of other of Nuvo products too. These are the inks I'm going to use for blending. I'm going to use them with the Nuvo blending brushes. This is all be for the first card. Either use the glimmer paste or some white embossing powder. And then I've got 3 sets each of this different kinds of confetti, glitter, and sequins. And each set is called Let It Snow. And there's 3 Let It Snows and 1's confetti that are different shapes. 1 is glitter and 1 is sequins. The other set is called Jingle Bells, and it's the same thing, but they're sort of red, green, gold, and copper. So I'm going to use 1 set each of those for the different cards. I pulled these snowflake dies. I believe they're from Lawn Fawn, and I had planned to have one sitting behind the first card as sort of in the background behind the confetti or sequins. So I have this, let's see, I think I'm going to pull this, I've got the stencils here too. I'm going to use those stencil brushes, but not with the stencil, but actually to use to blend a background with. And I am going to use these 2 stencils from the Crafter's Workshop. One is a new 5x7 snowflake stencil, and then another 6x6 that's holly. And I'm planning on using one of these pieces or both of these, some of this glitter cardstock, and I thought I would use the pearlescent, but I didn't end up using that. And I've got some other things there, some other kind of confetti. This is the die sentiment I'm going to use to cut out for the ornament card. And then I've got a stamp set from Avery L that I'm going to use a sentiment from. I've also got some gold crystal drops, and I'm going to use them instead of, I don't have red, so I'm going to use the gold instead of red for the holly berries on that stencil, and see how that works out. I bought these trays from Amazon when I redid my craft room recently, because they sized perfectly to fit into a shelf that I bought from, I believe it was from Michael's, and they're kind of shallow fixed shelves, and so these kind of fit in perfectly. And when I have an idea or something I'm going to work on for a team project or for myself, I'll put everything into this tray and then kind of keep it there until I'm ready to work on it. Or it's handy because I can take it upstairs and hang out with the family while I'm either working through something or testing things out, or maybe doing some coloring. So that's worked out really well. And the only thing is that they're acrylic, and they've got handles on both sides. They're actually a 12 by 12, which is why I bought them. But the 12 by 12 is actually the external, like the exterior overall dimension, and so it doesn't actually fit a 12 by 12 piece of paper, which is a little disappointing, but they're great for cards and other, embellishments and things. That's a piece of paper from Pink Fresh Studio I thought I might use, but I didn't end up using in the end. And then I've got a piece of vellum and some Nina Solar White 110-pound cardstock for the base pieces. All right, I speed this up pretty good. I think this is either 4 or 5 times as fast as I normally work. And I'm going to start by using stenciling or blending using the stencil brushes, these inks onto a background, onto the Tonic Easy Clean mat. So I've got this Snowflake stencil, and I'm just trying to figure out now kind of how it will work first. Kind of just to lay it out and see which of the snowflakes will work. It's going to be the smaller one. And so I put that aside, and then I'm going to start doing the blending. These are little cubes. They're hybrid inks, and they're in a set of 3 that are made to layer together, like layering inks. And I forgot the name of the whole set, but each individual color is, this is the Polar Ice, which is the lightest color. And what's neat about these cubes is that each one has the color on the front, and then on the side it's got the name and the color as well, sort of a little color swatch, so you could stack them like, sideways or on top of each other, so that you can see which colors they are, which I thought was kind of a neat way to do that. So Polar Ice is the lightest color. I'm going to do this sort of in an ombre. The next color is Laguna Bay. It's a darker turquoise. And then I'm going to blend it down finally into the purple, which is Spring Heather. These are fast drying inks, and the nice thing about it is that the stencil brushes keep it very nice and subtle, which is what I wanted. I wanted this card to be pretty completely contrasting from the other one, which is going to be very bright and sort of festive and Christmassy. I wanted this to be nice and cool and have the snowflakes on it. So I'm using a little piece of scratch paper there on the side so I don't get my fingerprints into the blending, which I usually always do. So that's kind of a miracle that I remember to do that. Once I get done blending with that, I am going to, that's where I thought about using that glitter, I think it's Moonstone, the glitter paste, but I decided to heat emboss the snowflake stencil instead. I'm using my Tonic Guillotine trimmer there to trim that up by about a quarter of an inch on each side. And then I'm going to trim this background piece that it'll be the piece that gets glued to my card base at 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. So now I'm just trying to decide what I'm going to do next. I do decide to go ahead and heat emboss this, and I'm going to use my heat or sort of embossing powder tool first to get rid of any static, and then I'm going to turn that blended piece of paper over with the stencil on the bottom and tape it from the back side. And I kind of offset it so some of the snowflakes are hanging off and some aren't. I'm using the Nuvo embossing ink and one of the blending sponges to sponge on the ink, which works so well. I don't know why I ever didn't use something like this instead of trying to do it direct to paper, because it's kind of hard to see. So these gets really well into all of the cracks and the little tiny pieces of the stencil. I'm going to use my tweezers there to hold while I add the embossing powder, which is the fine detail in Glacier White, and I just flip it off into a coffee filter that then I can dump back into the bottle, which is super handy, cheap, and easy way to clean up. So I'm still going to hold it with my tweezers there to protect my hands, and I'm going to heat it up until the embossing powder is smooth and melted, and I make sure I get all of it. And then I think I heat it back from the back a little bit to make sure it doesn't warp too much. Okay, so now I've got, that's all dry, and I decided I was going to cut a circle as the background piece for the shaker bit, and I matched a piece of, just a piece of cardstock I had, I think it's from Basil, to those blended turquoise colors. So I'm going to cut that out with the matching circle die using my Big Shot, and I'm also going to cut out the snowflakes. The smaller one is the one I'm going to use from just some white cardstock. So I'm going to pop out the snowflake from the die, or from the piece of cardstock it was cut out from, and I'll just save the bigger one for some other project later. I thought about using some embossing paste or some of the glimmer paste or something on top of this to give it some more shine or something else, but it really does get covered up a lot by the confetti and the sequins and things inside the shaker, so it really didn't need it that much. Okay, so once I get that all set up, I'm going to glue it onto that little circle background that I cut out. I am going to use the Nuvo glue stick. I think it's glue pen. I think it's the medium tip which has a chisel end. I'm just going to dab it over the back of the snowflake without getting too much on it, and then pop it down into the middle of that circle I cut out, and make sure it gets stayed on there pretty good. Now I'm going to adhere the blended piece onto the glitter paper, which actually I have to go back and use a stronger adhesive like my ATG gun, because the glitter paper just has a little bit of a grit to it. It didn't really stay with the tape runner. So I've got the sentiment that I'm going to use. That's where I'm trying to get pushed down on there. And the sentiment it's from this stamp set, and it says Let It Snow, and it's just a small one that I was planning on putting in the middle. So that's where I use the whole background and add it to my card base. And I have the vellum, and that's what I'm going to heat emboss my sentiment on. And so I use my embossing powder tool and get rid of any static. I always stamp at least twice for heat embossing, so just in case something gets smudged or I don't get enough ink on it, because that inevitably happens. And in this case it didn't matter because I didn't end up using either one of these. I used the fine detail in silver embossing powder from Nuvo, and put all that aside and get ready to put my sentiment on, I think. But I couldn't make a decision on how I wanted to attach it, whether I wanted it to be a small piece or a large piece or go across the whole, part of the page. And I was really upset that I didn't sort of put it on a bigger piece of vellum. And I end up going back and changing that. You'll see in a minute. So I adhere that circle with a snowflake down where I'm going to put the this shaker blister. And I open up these confetti pieces, these confetti bottles. This is the Let It Snow one. And so I'm going to use the snowstorm flakes, which are kind of iridescent and clear. And I'm going to use I got a little bit too many of those on there. I'm going to use the silver tinsel snowflakes, and I'm also going to use the blue dusk diamonds, which are kind of a pale turquoise color. And there's really so much static in here that it kind of just made a mess, and I got a lot of those, the little bitty snowflake, the kind of iridescent ones all over the place. So once I get that kind of situated, and I use the handy little sweeper tool, which I didn't really realize was going to be as handy as it is, but it somehow kind of avoids the staticky part and just flicks off all of those pieces to move them to the side. It's kind of amazing, and they don't stick to the bottom of it. So I adhered the shaker piece down, the round piece down, with the adhesive that comes on the back of it, which is wonderful and smart. And now I'm trying to decide again about this sentiment, and I just can't get happy with how it is. I couldn't decide whether I wanted it to come off one side or I wanted it to come to be a little tiny piece in the middle. And so I decided to punt on both of those, and I'm going to go back and heat emboss another piece onto a bigger piece of vellum. So I take out my vellum again. I use my my embossing powder tool, and then stamp the sentiment again, and I line it up on the center of this piece of vellum, and stamp it twice. I'm going to cover it with the silver embossing powder, and then heat that again until it's melted. And then I'm going to be able to use that entire piece of the vellum all the way across the front of the card, which I was much happier with. And so I trimmed that up pretty narrowly around the sentiment itself. And then I decided it might be kind of fun, and mostly because I needed a good place for the adhesive, to take the very ends of the piece of vellum and just tap the tiny edge into some of the embossing ink and add some of the silver embossing powder to that edge. That way I can adhere the adhesive and adhere it to the sides of the card, and then underneath the little bit of the words or the sentiment. So I'm going to dump that back in there and try to clean up a little bit. And then I'm going to use my multi-matte medium to add a little bit of that adhesive onto both of those sides and over the back around the little words, and put it down, and I'm going to weight it down with an acrylic block. And I have a bunch of these sequins all sitting out, so I decide I'm going to take some of those little tiny snowflakes that are still sitting out and adhere those, or add a few of those instead of sequins. So I just add a little bit of that multimedia matte, and I have this, it's actually my silhouette sort of pick-up tool thing. So I use that instead of a stick-it piece or whatever. This one works just fine for me. So I add a few of those on the front and weight that down again. And that is pretty much it for this card. You can see what it looks like here and the shaker bit. I do go back and you'll see when I add a little sort of base piece across the bottom, or the circumference of that shaker, which I make a decision to do in this second card. Okay, on to card number 2. And we're going to start off pretty much the same way. I'm going to add the stencil to the back of this, and I'm going to open this expanding mousse, and the color is Bramley Bramley apple. Yes, it's kind of a green apple color. And I'm going to use the palette knife to spread it on, not too thin and not too thick, just it spreads on really like icing, and it's really easy to spread on. And I only go in one direction because I didn't want to risk pulling up the stencil and getting underneath it. But it makes a great clean transfer, and so I'm just going to wipe the edges off with my fingers a little bit and clean that up a little bit. You can leave it as it is, which is shimmery, and let it dry, or you can heat it up. And the difference in this mousse and the other mousse is that this, when you do heat it up, it gives it like a texture that's kind of sandy and grainy, and it raises it up and makes it a little bit more three-dimensional, which gives it a lot of neat texture to it, especially for something like this. And the thing that is really interesting is that it's the total opposite of embossing powder, where embossing powder is like the dull powder, and then as you heat it up, it gets shiny. And this is the opposite, where it starts off shimmery, and as you heat it up, it kind of dulls, and you can see, that's where you can see whether you've got all of the heat on it. And it makes that that sort of textured piece. So that's done now, and I'm going to open up the sentiment, and then I'm going to die cut. And it just says Merry Christmas. It's got the background piece and the letter piece that are separate. I'm going to cut the background piece from vellum so that I just have a little bit of a separation there, and just kind of make it not too much of a contrast between the words and the background. And I'm using my big shot there to cut it out. I cut it out twice because I've learned my lesson. I always try and do that more than once. And then I just decided, instead of doing white, I pulled this, it is a mirror finish, I believe it's a mirror finish, mirror card gloss. But it's not really glossy. It's sort of a matte mirror, if that makes sense. So it's subtle. It's not super shiny. And it's really pretty. I mean, it's a bright, I think it's called Opera Red. So I cut that out twice. Mostly not because of it. I thought I might mess up, but I thought I wanted to stack the two of them and give it a little bit more height and dimension. So I add those two, and then I have my vellum piece that'll be underneath it. One of the things that I love about these die cuts when they come in the packaging is these little, the way they package it. It's in like an envelope, just a plastic envelope sleeve that you can tuck back in, and then it comes with these little grommet sort of pieces that snap on and off, and they're real easy to take off, but they hold it together well, so that there's not like a big, really hard piece of plastic that you have to cut apart, and it's a big pain, and they have cute little sayings on them. So I thought those were really a nice little detail, and I'm a total sucker for packaging, so that's something to look out for when you get your die cuts and check them out. I used a piece of the pistachio green cardstock from Tonic as the base piece, and I cut out, using the circle piece that's part of the shaker die, I cut out the circle from that same red to have as the background for my ornament. And this is kind of when I decided that I really felt like that needed a finishing piece around the edge of it. Not because of the adhesive necessarily, but because you could see a lot of the sort of just the under part around it, and I felt like it needed a more finished edge. So I took an older die cut circle die that I have. I think it's from Lawn Fawn, and it's got a stitched edge. And I layered it with the circle that comes with this shaker piece and sort of made a ring, and I die cut it out of white and the green color, and I'm going to cover up the edge of that circle shaker bit on both cards. You'll see it at the end of the other card, but I'm going to use this multimedia matte and a little paintbrush. I just put a little bit on it, some scratch paper and a paintbrush, and I add that to the vellum base piece that I had cut out, and then glued that part down to the card itself. I'm actually going to put some dimensional adhesive on the back of the stenciled holly piece, and before I stick that down, I need to make the ornament part. So I go ahead and glue down the centerpiece that'll be the back of the ornament, and then I'm going to glue down and I needed to use a liquid adhesive because of that. That is very textured, that holly piece there. So now I'm going to use my little brush again, and I'm going to layer the second die cut word Merry Christmas across the other one. I don't use this technique a lot. I know a lot of people do, because I'm usually not very good at lining them up and it looks kind of sloppy. If I take my time and use a brush and be very careful with it, I can do it right. And this cut really crisply through that paper, sort of that foiling, kind of card. So it looked really good. I was really pleased with it. So I add more adhesive to the back of it, some more liquid matte medium, and then I'm going to put that onto the front of the card. And I did put that one on pretty thick there too because of the same reason, and I'm going to weight it down with an acrylic block and another thing on top. And then I'm going to grab the other confetti piece that's the jingle bells, and I'm going to use the green stars and the festive gold circles out of it, and I'm going to use another confetti I have that's the red carpet circles that are sort of bigger circles, red circles. So I just trimmed off a piece of the bottom of the base. You could see kind of through it. So I kind of can't make a decision whether I want the outside ring piece to be white or green, and I can go back and forth between that for a bit. But I used some red and white twine, and I just tie a little bow, and once I get it kind of situated the way I want to, I put a little dab of glue on it to keep the bow in place and set it aside. And then I'm going to grab another piece of the twine to use back behind it, so it looks like it's hanging from the ornament over the card. So I go ahead and do I think I'll go ahead and do the shaker bit first. I can't remember. There, I'm trying to fuss with it and decide whether I'm going to use white or green. So I go ahead and put the confetti pieces down. This is the red carpet circles. And then I'm going to use the gold, because I decided to use this gold crystal drops instead of where the berries would be red, I decided to make them gold because I don't have any red crystal drops. So I add the gold, and then I'm going to add the green. Sorry, I'm on camera here. And then I'm going to add some of the little green stars. And I'm just going to use my little sweeper tool to flick off those other pieces. And once I get those kind of mounted up, I'm going to take off the adhesive from the blister shaker piece. I don't know how to call it. And pop that over the top of it. This makes a shaker card so easy. And there's so many cute ideas I could think of, like a snow globe or a hot air balloon or just a balloon. There's so many great things you can do. And there's 5 in a set, so you can get a lot of cards or other things out of it. So once I clean that up a bit, I'm going to take the twine there and wrap it around the top. I'm going to put this ring around that first. And I'm going to add the twine to the top and then adhere it back with a piece of the dimensional adhesive I have back behind that. And then I'm going to put the bow on top of it to the top of the ornament, which is all off camera, sorry. And I'm going to take the adhesive off and pop it onto my card base. And that is pretty much it. You can see the stills here. This is the first card, and that's the ring piece that I had cut around it. And there's the final product there. I love the soft colors and the way it blended out. And then this is the brighter card, and I really like it. I just think it's so fun and happy and Christmassy, and it was so much fun to use all those different products on. So I'm real excited about the way it turned out. That is it all together. Thanks so much for stopping by. If you haven't subscribed, I would love for you to do so. And there'll be a couple other videos at the end you can check out if you'd like. And we will catch you at the next video. Thanks so much. Bye.